Do you think we get to choose what we believe? The answer is really important because it's going to determine how we deal with people who have evil beliefs and act evilly accordingly. For simplicity, let's accept the premise that beliefs are either true or false based on whether they reflect or distort reality, and good or evil based on whether they uphold or violate universal human rights. Philosophers, please lodge your objections to those categories and definitions in the comments. It will be very helpful for engagement. How are beliefs formed? Again, vastly simplifying this process, let's boil it down to there is an environment and a self. And within the environment, there are inputs, experiences, every piece of media you've ever been exposed to, your education, and the opinions and testimony of your peers and relatives. Then there's something that happens within the self that decides what to pay attention to among all those inputs. Someone who's raised in a dangerous cult, let's call it zombieism, might grow up surrounded almost entirely by inputs that are false and evil. Most people raised in such a cult are going to grow up with false and evil beliefs, but there's still some agency, right? Because some people will seek out and focus in on one little truthful good thing among all that propaganda, and they'll focus on that and they'll seek out more information like that, and they'll change their beliefs and they'll leave zombieism behind. Meanwhile, someone else might be raised in an open-minded family with a good education. They're surrounded by lots of good, truthful inputs, and yet they tend to focus in on one evil lie, and they go down a rabbit hole of misinformation and wind up with evil white supremacist beliefs. So what is this thing that happens inside of us that decides what to pay attention to and which inputs to turn into beliefs? Well, Abrahamic religions have struggled with this question for thousands of years, okay? And in those religious traditions, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, the self is called your soul. And your soul is either ultimately good or bad. And if you're a Christian, that means that you will be in the afterlife either rewarded or punished based on whether your soul was good or bad enough. And if you're a Calvinist, that thing happening inside of you, you actually don't have any control over it. It's not a choice. It was preordained by God. You're still going to be punished for it if it's bad, but God wanted it to be bad and wanted you to be punished. If you're not Calvinist, then you believe that thing that happens inside of you is free will and you do have choice. Evil is a choice if you are a non-Calvinist Christian. But if, like me, you have a more scientific, secular outlook on the world, then you understand that whatever this is that's happening inside your brain is some combination of your genetics, your psychology, and your neurology, all put together. You know, how the little folds in your brain are interacting with those inputs outside of you that your senses are attesting to. That all makes up your unique neurodiversity. Indeed, many people who have left the cult of zombieism have told me that they credit their neurodiversity for being the reason they focused in on that one contradiction. But we have to be really careful about thinking that those people are better than the people who stay in zombieism, because there's a long history of looking at this thing that happens in people's brains and deciding whether it's good or bad. And that's eugenics. And that's associated, once you start saying that some people's brains are good and some people's brains are bad, then you get to the good-brained people get their human rights and the bad-brained people lose their human rights. And things like sterilizing and, imprisoning and killing populations that have the bad kind of brain, punishing them, is associated with fascism and is evil according to our original definition. So if you answer, do we get to choose what we believe, with yes, and you're coming from like a religious tradition, then your approach to evil is going to be punishment. And the definition of punishment is intentionally causing suffering. Whether you are putting a kid on a 2-minute timeout or torturing someone to death, it's all intentionally causing suffering. Another word for this is a carceral approach, and it is the logic behind cops and prisons and torture and the death penalty. If you come to the conclusion that no, we actually don't get to choose what we believe. Our beliefs are formed as a result of complex interactions between our unique environment and the unique inputs that only we specifically are exposed to, and our unique psychology, genetics, and neurology working together, then you're going to answer the problem of how do we deal with people with evil beliefs by saying we need to change the environment so that no one develops false or evil beliefs. How do we do that? The zombie cult has spent hundreds of billions of dollars flooding our media environment with false, evil inputs. As someone who does not own a media conglomerate, I don't feel like I can reduce the number of zombieist inputs that are out there in the world. But what I can do, and have been doing for 2 years, is putting my own little true inputs out there on social media in the hopes of making a difference. And because a grassroots effort of millions of us over the past 2 years have been putting true, good, anti-zombieist information out into the world over the past 2 years, we've caused a global paradigm shift away from zombieism. And the fact that individual people without any funding have beaten the hundreds of billions of dollars in zombieist propaganda in terms of swaying global public opinion has really given me a lot of hope, and has proved to me that maybe ourselves have some tendency to seek out the true and the good over the evil and false. But tell me, what do you think is the answer to this question? And which of these approaches do you think is going to bring us a better world?